The floor.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and other senators, thank you for hearing this bill. It's a simple bill, kind of gets the federal government out of this statute, which we should do. I would just give you a little background. 3 or 4 years ago, I met with Mr. Talon and some other gentlemen in my area, and we were discussing, you know, if we had an emergency or the sheriff needed some help or such, you know, how could we find help for the sheriff in these, when he needs help? And this help would be trained and such, and we know that you can't have an organized militia in the state unless it's under the statutes. So we knew we couldn't go that direction. So we found this statute, and I didn't even know it's there. I think probably all the states in our country have similar statutes, and it goes back to our early history in America. Early in World War I and then World War II, there was always worry that, especially in World War I, when they took all our guard out of the states and took them to the war, the states realized they didn't have, you know, any force at home to protect us, and so they set up the state guard stuff, and it had been until 1983 that you needed to. It needed to be that if the National Guard was in the state, then you couldn't have a state guard. Well, they changed that so you can have a state guard even if the National Guard is here. The intent was, well, I told you what the intent was anyway. So I'll go on and kind of describe the bill. I do want to clarify that there's 2 different chapters. Chapter 9 it's about National Guard. We are in Chapter 10, which is about State Guard. So I wanted to make sure we're not intermingling between the two. So the bill's very simple. I think I'm just going to read the introduction. You've all read it. This is about the Wyoming State Guard. The bill would remove activation of the National Guard of Wyoming into service of the United States as a prerequisite for the organization of the Wyoming State Guard. Removing the federal involvement in the Wyoming State Guard, allowing the governor to organize and maintain the Wyoming State Guard, specifying the source of payment for service in the State Guard, and making conforming amendments. So we'll go through the bill now. In Section 1, we are working in Article 19, Chapter 10, 101A, and 102. So in 101, we have the organization by the governor and the appointment of the council. So we're deleting where it says if the National Guard of Wyoming is ordered into the service of the United States, then the governor may organize. So we're deleting that part. So it's going to say the governor may organize and maintain within the state such military force as the governor deems necessary to preserve the public peace, to execute the laws of the state, to suppress insurrection or to repeal invasion or repel. And then the forces shall be known as Wyoming State Guard. The Guard shall be used as a model for the control and governance of the Wyoming State Guard. The Wyoming State Guard shall be of such strength and shall be armed and trained and equipped in such manner as prescribed by the governor. So this all is up to the governor if he wants to pursue this. I do want to mention that up in there. It, you know, kind of gets everybody fired up where we talk about to preserve the public peace and execute the laws of the state, to suppress insurrection and to repel invasion. That wording comes from our Constitution in Article 17 and Section 5. So we just copied that in there and put it in there. So just to calm you, I guess. Then we go to B, and it talks about the council, and I did bring maybe an amendment that you might consider. Would be on page 3, line 3, and it would just describe how the governor would choose the council, and I wanted to kind of spread it out amongst the, in the state, and make sure it was an odd number so they could vote and have an agreement, I guess. So that just kind of goes to the council. Currently in the statute, it doesn't, I can't find where they, where he sets that up. And then on page 3, down on line 17, it talks about where an appropriation would come from if this state guard was put out for an emergency. And then we keep going. On page 4, I did put an appropriation in there just to, in case the governor did decide he wanted to call the commission and have them have meetings and discuss how they might want to go about, setting up a state guard. My intent would be that it would mostly be voluntary and dollars wouldn't be needed for those that would participate. So that pretty much is the bill, and I guess I'm ready for questions.
Thank you, Senator Larson. Committee, questions for the sponsor? Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, I'm thinking that a lot of that national was in there because they might put up some money for the guard. Is that not true, or is that something we can do without?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Anderson, you are correct. I think that was the intent back before 1980 or 1983 that the federal government was funding some of this, and I think you are correct. There is no federal funds coming to this.
Senator Kolb.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Larson, just a general question here. Who is going to be in this said state guard? I mean, who people, not the body that might be the governance body, but who exactly is going to be? I mean, where are these people coming from? What are these people? I have a couple questions, but that's the first one I'll ask, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kolb, I would hope it would be the people in your community that would like to volunteer, such as they do for search and rescue and such. There are lots and lots of ex-military people out there, especially in my area, that I know about, and I think they would be interested.
Follow up.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I lost my train of thought, Mr. Chairman. Won't be the first time and it won't be the last time, but I'll come back when I do get it back. I'll look at my question I wrote.
Senator Anderson.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I think in my area, there's a lot of ex-military or people that weren't in the military that like to volunteer for this. What I worry about is whether they're really fit to do it. There's quite a few of them that I don't know what kind of job they could perform for the Guard. Is there any thought in that other chapter about that they have to be physically and mentally fit?
Senator Larson.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know what to say there. I would think that ought to be up to the commission to decide, how they're gonna set it up. And I'm sure they'll do their best, and we'll get the people that are qualified, definitely. They need to know if we did go to where they may have guns. I don't know if that's gonna be something that would happen. I would guess that they would have their own guns, and they would have to be a specific gun and meet the requirements for whatever the commission sets up. So I think this all depends on what the commission wants. There are other states and examples that I think we could go to and get some ideas of how theirs are set up.
Senator Larson, when you refer to the commission, you're talking about the council that's in here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay,
Mr.
The council. Great.
Mr. Chairman, you are correct.
There is no commission.
I keep saying commission,
Okay.
but it is a council.
Correct.
And
Okay.
there is not a set number for the council currently unless we put in an amendment. You are right. I'm sorry. I
Understood.
kept
Thank you.
saying commission, council is what I want to say.
Okay, thank you. Senator Kolb, the
Yes,
thought came back.
I'm back aboard my original train. So I wonder why, Mr. Chairman, Senator Larson, why it's not a shall. I mean, we seem to leave this up to the governor to do this or not to do this. And I think if we're going to go through all this, I don't even know why that question isn't more positively stated as shall do it. That's my question, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman and
Senator
Senator
Larson.
Kolb, I would agree with you. I think this should be something we do. And I would be very open to changing that to shall. I was just not wanting to kill the bill.
Senator Kolb, I believe, you know, it's existing statute, and so it's may right now, so you would have to change it to shall if you wanted to, and as the good senator said, he didn't want to jeopardize the effort. No. Okay,
Miss-
further questions?
Mr. Chairman, I do have a Mr. Talon here that came all the way from my area, which is Long Drive, and I would definitely hope that he can speak.
Absolutely. Mr. Talon, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senators, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you about this. Since that conversation that Senator Larson reported, you know, I took the deep dive into this subject. I've done a lot of research on it. Apologies in advance for sending you that 10-page paper that I wrote about it, but I wanted to attack a lot of the issues and questions that do come up. So if I can speak briefly on this now, much more briefly than that paper. I moved to Cody, Wyoming area with my family after retiring from 20 years of federal service in the National Nuclear Security Administration, where we were the people who moved nuclear weapons and weapons-grade material over the highways. I also served many years ago in the U.S. Army, in the Army National Guard, in one state and one county level police reserve organization. I was a commissioned officer at one time in the New Mexico State Defense Force. So I sort of viewed this from the inside in one of our companion states. And that's where my interest in this subject began some years ago. I've been a volunteer firefighter in Park County District 2 for the last 10 years, still am. And for the last 5 years, I've been providing firearms training to armed school staff in accordance with the current statute. So I'm coming from a lot of different but related perspectives when I say that we are very thin on the ground here in Wyoming for responding to or recovering from major natural or man-made disasters of any sort. We have lots of real estate, lots of ground to cover, long response times. I encounter this all the time in the fire business, and too few responders, especially if we look at the possibility, which may be a low probability but high consequence event, of long duration resource intensive events like our wildfires last year, or multiple simultaneous or overlapping incidents that can compete for the outside resources that all the states rely upon. You know, we send our folks out of state, other states assist us, you know, when we have dire needs. But that only works when the incidents or events that you're reacting to are isolated and limited in scope. When we're all facing similar problems, it gets tough and resources are often very thin. Wyoming has about 200 highway patrol troopers in the entire state. Sheriff's offices, all of them that I'm familiar with, they are all struggling with recruiting and retention to fill their authorized strength with deputies. In Park County, when we have accidents and incidents, you know, out away from the major population centers, we sometimes wait 30 minutes to an hour for the first deputy to arrive because the on-duty deputies were simply that far away. We have, of course, local police departments, emergency medical services. We have a handful of responders from various other state agencies. And of course, we have approximately 3,000 soldiers and airmen in the Army National Guard and the Air National Guard. But every one of them is subject to activation into Title X federal service and deployment out of the state. And no one complains about that, but it could leave us very shorthanded if we have a substantial portion of our National Guard deployed when emergency situations require manpower beyond the routine. A volunteer state guard, even if it's only a few hundred strong, if it were distributed around the state, it would provide us with the possibility, and we'd have to make this happen, through this Council of Defense and through the efforts of the legislature and the governor's office and the military department, if we do it right, it could provide additional trained manpower with very short response times, local people responding to local needs, in support of civil authorities, under the same concepts and rules that the National Guard and the active duty military abide by in support of civil authorities, and direct support for the National Guard in performing all of its state missions when it is not deployed out of the state. And we can do all this, I'm convinced, at a very modest cost if we do it right. But that's really a discussion that we don't have to resolve at this time. That's why the original legislation sets up that Council of Defense. And I think that to address somewhat of what Senator Larson was saying, we have the opportunity here to start with a blank sheet of paper. So when we're looking at issues like Senator Anderson, Mr. Chairman, Senator Anderson mentioned this about people who might be willing to volunteer their time and expertise and serve, but might not be able to meet, say, physical fitness standards, we can address that. We have a lot more liberty to address that. There are roles that those people could fill and fill very, very beneficially for the state. And we could fence those folks into roles where they would not endanger themselves or anyone else or any missions, because we can start with a blank sheet of paper and we can build this organization any way we choose within very, very broad constraints when we start. So that's a discussion that lies in the future, if the state proceeds to organize this force. But this bill, Senate File 45, clearly, as Senator Larson described, it's a small preparatory initial step towards creating such a capability, and this bill itself incurs no risk and very, very minimal cost. So I think it's a very risk-free initial step. Now, and I don't want to take too much more of your time, but just to reiterate a couple of the points that Senator Larson raised. Current Wyoming statutes recognize the State Guard as a state military force, part of our organized militia alongside the National Guard. For the governor of Wyoming to be able, at his discretion, according to current statutory language, to organize the State Guard at any point in the future for any need that he recognizes, we have to amend these existing statutes to remove this outdated verbiage about the status of the National Guard activated or deployed, and the approval or guidance of the Secretary of Defense. That needs to go. Those are archaic historical factors that do not apply under current federal law. The governor's first step, obviously, would be if we make these amendments and we streamline this process and bring it up to date, his first step would be to convene this Council of Defense, and all of these outstanding questions about what we could do, how we could do it, who we would recruit, and what their skills and specialties and missions would be, that's all up to us. That's not defined for us by anyone else. I appreciate the insight that Senator Larson showed in asking for this appropriation of $25,000, which is, I guess we could call this seed money. If the governor chooses to appoint this council and start the process of developing this concept, he's going to incur administrative expenses and travel expenses. Not a great deal of funding, but he needs to be able to start that process, in an expeditious way. And I think that's what this suits. So, and my last comment is just to reiterate again that approval of this bill as a preparatory step, it doesn't really demand that we debate or certainly not reach a decision on the merits of a State Guard or even the general shape of it, only that we commit to update and amend our statutes to provide the governor with the freedom of action he would need if he chooses to go forward with this. And that is really all I have. I did offer members of the committee some material that I found and downloaded that describes the Florida State Guard, which may be the best template that we have currently for a state guard that was organized, in fact, organized essentially out of nothing. They started with a blank sheet because their state guard from World War II era was deactivated many, many years ago. And they started 2.5 years ago with a blank sheet and recreated it. And they've done a very good job of it. And they've built a force of almost 700 carefully vetted, qualified people in a number of different specialties and specialized units, as you see in those printouts. And they've done a good job of it, and they've used the heck out of them over the last 2 years. And it's been a great asset to the state. There are other examples around the country, and I've researched many of them as best I can, but that was the best I could find. And so I just shared that with you to show one example, one template perhaps of what could be done. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Talon. Any questions? Senator Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Talon, looking back in history here, I believe Senator Larson said in '83, the laws changed where we couldn't have a home guard anymore. And do you have any thoughts on why that was? You know, I honestly think we need to look at history and understand and try to learn from history. When I think back 160 years ago, there was a little war going on here in the States, and the home guards were there, and they got out of control. And why was this authority removed, and how do we control that?
Interesting question, Mr. Chairman, Senator Cooper. I spent some time reconstructing this.
Microphone, please.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
And the answer is that it really goes back to 1903, which was the point in history when the United States took all of the state militias, which as you know, the state militias have been active, I mean, from colonial times, you know, all through our Civil War. And it came to a head in the Spanish-American War where they called up state militias into federal service under the provisions of the U.S. Constitution. And performance was very, very spotty because there was no standardization of training, no standardization of uniforms, rank structures, equipment. Spanish-American War was, you know, not won by the cohesion of the U.S. ground forces, because that was a terrible show. The National Guard was created in 1903, and over the next decade and a half, there were one and another federal law trying to refine that concept. And they actually did a pretty good job of it. The last of those major federal actions was in 1916, when World War I was looming on the horizon, or our entry into World War I was looming ahead. And that's where they removed all prior restrictions on how the federal government could use the state militias, the National Guard, in wartime. Because that was the first time the federal government had the authority to mobilize state militias for the duration of a conflict and send them anywhere they needed to go. And in the next year, they did that. Next year, they mobilized 300,000 National Guardsmen, shipped them over to France. And that's where the modern state guards were born, because a number of the governors marched on Washington and said, "You've left us without any means. This state military force has always been our backup for contingencies in our states, you know, natural and man-made, and you have taken all of those resources away from us." And the federal government responded very quickly and said, "You're right." And we recognize that. And so that was the first time in 1917 that the federal government said, "We think that your state militias should really have two branches, two subsets. One, the National Guard, which is subject to federal activation, and the second one being your state guard, which we can't put our fingers on. These people will never be called upon for federal service. They will always be at your disposal within your state for whatever purposes you deem." And the one thing that did not get sorted out in that time, in 1917 and then on through World War II, that provision that those guards could only be raised and organized when the National Guard had been activated as a federal force, that remained in place. And so what you had was most of the states of the Union raised substantial state guards, 160,000, I think, in World War I, and more than that in World War II. almost every state in the union raised state guards, but under those laws, as soon as the guard was released from service at the end of the war and came home, they had to disband the home guard or the state guard. And that did not, in fact, change until 1983. So what happened in 1983 was the federal government finally responded to the states and said, if you see a use for having a state guard that is not liable to federal activation and service, you may do so. So 1983 actually opened up that possibility, and that's where a bunch of states came back, dusted off their old statutes, amended that language out, and said, yes, we do have a use for a state military force. Thank you very much. And as Senator Larson alluded to, I found majority of the states in the union have statutes like ours on the books, whether they utilize them or not. And there's about 22, 24 states that actually have standing state guards at one level of mobilization or another. But that only became possible in 1983 with that last amendment to the federal law.
Thank you, Mr. Talon. Other questions?
Yes, please. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Talon, in the fiscal note, or maybe this is for Mr. Larson, obviously it's $25,000 to set up a commission. Do we have any real thoughts on what this is actually going to cost? I mean, it's obviously not 25,000. 25,000 sets the commission up, or the council up, but you know, we're talking multi-million dollars to set up a state guard.
Did I address that? Thank you.
And I'd like to add on that, but again, what's the cost if we don't? So,
Well, that's, yes. Chairman and Senator Cooper.
Please come forward.
Yes, sir. That's a good question. And again, the answer, the facile answer is it can be what we want it to be. But the realistic answer, I think, comes in looking at how other states have approached this. And there are fewer varieties than there are states with state guards, fortunately. But typically, the more successful state guard organizations, and I would call those Florida recently, Texas, and California, interestingly enough. California has probably the greatest manpower in the California State Guard of any state in the union. And what you see in these examples, in their statutes, as they stand now, they usually have provisions very much worded very much like our existing statutes, that members of the Guard, when they are activated under orders of the governor, which, as I see this applied in other states, this means with a specific mission. So this platoon, that company, this battalion, mobilized under orders for a certain duration and a certain mission by the office of the governor and his military department, then those people are paid. And they're not paid in any other circumstance. This is similar to what I experience in the firefighting world. We're all volunteer firefighters. We're not paid for responding to fires, but if the fire is a wildfire on Forest Service or BLM land, we respond and work without pay as local volunteer firefighters. But if they call us back because the Forest Service needs additional manpower on the second, third day, fourth week, second month, then they pay, that agency pays. And that's the only way volunteer firefighters make any money from their service. So a lot of states do this. They say, if we call you up at need and activate you for a specific mission in support of the National Guard or civil authority or whatever it may be, then we will pay you. And typically, as we have language, in our statutes today, that pay is at or near the rate at which National Guard members of the same ranks are paid. But administrative duties, training, not paid. And no dollars paid out for that. That's volunteer service. People show up just like my fellow firefighters show up, several times a month for training, and we aren't paid for it. So it's possible, and we have examples of success in organizations that consider themselves primarily volunteer forces, and it's only if they're activated at need to serve under orders that they earn any pay at all. And that holds the cost down very considerably.
Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, Mr. Talon. Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, the fiscal note says that to establish a platoon of 52 personnel, it's estimated to be at least $250,000 per year for pay and benefits. So that would just be one platoon. And maybe we could have more than one platoon in Wyoming, I don't know.
Okay, further questions? Senator Kolb?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the bill title, removing activation of National Guard of Wyoming into service of the United States as a prerequisite for the organization of the Wyoming State Guard. So, in your opinion, there's no place for us to be involved as the Wyoming National Guard goes with aiding the federal government in certain circumstances when they are needed. This removes it. I mean, that's in your bill title here.
Senator Talon?
If I could clarify that, Mr. Chairman, that's not the intent of that language. What the intent of that language in the original statute was it mirrored federal law at the time that that statute was written, which said a state guard, which is a distinct force, can only be organized and active when the National Guard of that state is deployed under federal orders elsewhere. And that was the case for many, many decades, for most of the 20th century. In 1983, that was removed from federal law. And so what it really is saying is now any state in the union can organize and maintain a state guard regardless of what the federal or what the National Guard is doing. So it doesn't affect National Guard roles or responsibilities at all. It just removes that linkage between National Guard status and the activation of a state guard. So it just used to be that if you had a state guard, you had to disband them and send them home the moment your National Guard came back from a war zone. And that's no longer the case in federal law. So the idea here is just to bring state law in accord with federal law, and it doesn't impact National Guard roles at all.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Thank you, Senator Larson, Mr. Talon. Could I have the military department come up and address this from their point of view? General Porter? Colonel Henkel? Welcome.
Hey, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Major General Greg Porter, and I'm the Adjutant General for the state of Wyoming. Senator Larson and Mr. Down did a very fulsome job of explaining what's going on. I think I had just a couple of things to add. One really gets back to Senator Kolb's question of removing there's some good things that the bill does. Most specifically is removing that requirement that the guard has to be federalized in order to establish a state guard. I think that language is old, as Mr. Talon pointed out, and I think it'd be very important for us to get after being able to establish a state guard before the federalization process occurred. I see the council in this case as really framing what the capabilities the state guard has to do. I can see that over the course of this next year, the council will meet and we'll sort of lay out what kind of tasks and purposes do we have for the state guard in order to perform its mission. I think if we anticipate that the next war, and we certainly are going down that way, is going to be a total war, and all of us will be committed at some point or another, I'm convinced there'll be a fight here at home, whether that's cyber, whether that's the enemy is going to get after us here at home. I think we're going to need to have capability. So I think it's important to be able to have the ability to do that, and for the governor to have that flexion, have the options that it would take in case the National Guard is completely committed or federalized in that fight. I'm a little dubious that it's not going to cost money. I think as Senator Cooper said, if we're going to get real capability out of here, it's going to take some resources to do it. But I think it's the council's job to probably sort of offer a menu of what kind of capability the governor and the state can afford and want. We can give you this for this much money, time, effort, energy. We can give you this for this much money, time, effort, energy. I think that's the council's job, is to provide that recommendation to the governor and the state, and then that decision can get made. I had one comment on the bill that I would like the committee to consider. When it talks about compensation, there on page 3 and line 22 and 23, it talks about that they will serve, individuals that serve in the state guard will do so at 75% of what their rated pay is. Although we try to separate the National Guard and the State Guard, when we put our folks on state active duty, this is the authorization we use to pay them. So if right now the statute says you'll be paid at your current rank, so if you're a Sergeant E5 on the federal side, that's how you get paid on the state side is too. What this would do would lower that pay. So the person that's doing state active duty, say we got them going to a flood, they actually get only 75% of the wage that they receive as a federal person. I would like the committee to consider just striking that language out so that we don't reduce the pay for when they're in state active duty. They're already not getting all the pay that they don't get their basic allowance for housing. They don't get any of those incentives serving on state active duty. And actually, they become a little bit in jeopardy if a soldier or airman were to injure themselves during state active duty. That could curtail their military career. It's happened before in Montana. We had some folks respond to a wildfire and they were injured badly enough that their military career ceased, but they weren't able to receive retirement, medical stuff, anything for that. So they're already sort of operating at a deficit in terms of incentives and pay. So for your consideration, maybe just strike that language and just leave it as it currently is in the statute, which is you get your base pay as an E5 or E6 or whatever rank you are. Anything that we would add? I think that's what I have, Mr. Chairman and committee. I'm certainly ready to answer any questions.
Thank you, General Porter. Questions?
Mr. Chairman, that line 21 or 23 there, that would take care of your guys that do state duty? That isn't just related to the militia?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ash, that's correct. That's the reference we use in the statute to establish the pay. So that's what we use. Even though it's talking about state militia, it also refers to, in this case, the organized state militia, which is the National Guard in state active duty. So yes, sir, that's what we use.
For both of them.
That's too bad.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a general question. What kind of weapons would be available to these folks? I don't know. And so that was a general question. Could they use anything that you have in inventory as weapons? What kind of weapons would you envision these folks being able to use? Fully automatic weapons, tanks, machine guns? I don't know, but what are your thoughts, General?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Cole, there's a very bright line in what this establishes. This state guard would not be able to use any federal equipment, federal weapons at all. So if we were to arm them, it would have to be either personal weapons or the state would have to procure and provide weapons for them, depending. I think that's one of the recommendations we're going to have to make. And that's clear to anything, anywhere from uniforms to mess kits to vehicles to weapons, whatever it is. Well, none of that could be of federal use.
Senator Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General, do you envision this as a state police force?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Cooper, I have not. When we've discussed this before, it really has come down to a lot, like Mr. Talon and Senator Larson says, what do we do in those emergencies if our guard was gone? Who can respond to floods? Who can help maybe protect some infrastructure that's critical, power stations and that sort of thing? I know our legal folks were a little owly about the enforcement of state laws. I would be very cautious about using the state guard in that role. I think we would definitely want to be more focused to those emergency response sort of capabilities. But the way it's currently written, you can enforce state laws.
Okay, thank you, General. Appreciate your testimony.
Thank you, sir.
I'll open it up for public comment. Anyone care to say a few words to us? Morning, Mr. Allred.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'd like to speak in support of this bill. I think it's a long time coming. As was.
Yeah, please
I
introduce
apologize. Carl Allred from Evanston. As was mentioned, I think this should be a shall, not a may. But as it stands, just to give you a little bit, I joined the Army right out of high school. Went off in that. And then later on, I spent time in the Utah National Guard, first serving as an MP, and then moved up to where I was the NBC, NCS, Nuclear, Biological, and Chemical Warfare NCO for Troop Command in Utah. But one thing that a lot of people don't even realize is the National Guard does not belong to the state. It's the federal, they're federal. All their equipment belongs to the feds. Their M16s, the tanks, the Jeeps, tents, everything belongs to the feds. And basically, they can take them whenever they want. This does leave, historically, this country was founded by militia. You look in Lexington and Concord, who sat there on those bridges? And we wouldn't even exist without the state militia. Right now, we have no state militia. They call the National Guard that, but that was federalized for a reason. It took it away from the states. The states do not have a militia anymore. And I think it's time that we bring that back. Let the state be in charge of our state and to have a force that we can utilize when we need them. It doesn't matter if the feds want to pull the National Guard, that we still have a force here. And I would just urge consideration for this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Thank you. Appreciate your testimony. Any further public comment? Mr. Winnie, welcome.
Mr. Chairman, Bill Winnie, Sublette County. Real quickly, you all asked who would be in this, aside from National Guard personnel. I'd note out in my neck of the woods, in Sublette County, we have tip-top search and rescue, so we can get up into the mountains up there and find people that have gotten lost or whatever. They're in fine physical condition, and there's other folks like that in the area. So I think they will have personnel when needed. Subject to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee questions? Thank you, Mr. Winnie. Any further public comment? Oh, did you have a question? Okay. And we have no one online on this for this bill. Thank you. So I'll close public comment. Committee, what's your pleasure? Okay, it's been moved by Senator Brennan. Do I have a second? Well, for discussion, I will second the bill. Let's discuss it. Any comments, questions? Senator Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this is a real interesting idea, but I think it's a lot bigger than this bill that we're looking at here today. It's just going to take a lot of serious thought, really in-depth research, some really good cost analysis, if you will. There's a lot to this, an awful lot. I don't think it's a bad idea, but I think it's a lot more than just, it needs to have a lot more thought than just creating a council and giving the governor authority. I think we need to really look into this deeply before we move forward.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cooper. My 2 cents worth, it's already in statute. We know that the State Guard is, it's already there in Chapter 10. If it was shall, I think I would be a little more hesitant as well. It is a may. And I think in order to get to that detail, the proposed amendment would bring on this council and define the members. I believe the council would set the parameters of what is needed. And all of this is gonna be subject to a future appropriation if we're going to man and equip this force, right? It's gonna cost money in the future, but we don't know what those dollars will be right now. But this council would be able to derive that information. Yes, we'll be expending $25,000 or whatever to put this council in motion, but in order to look at the issue, I think you need to do that. Either that, or you're going to have to find another method. Ask for a task force, that's not gonna happen. Ask for some kind of perhaps a looking at an interim topic by some committee. That probably will be difficult to do because we have so many other priorities. So frankly, I'm certainly not opposed to doing this, putting together the council, and then let them come back to us with recommendations on how do we fund this force if we really need it. So my 2 cents worth. Senator Brennan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't think I need to repeat really what you said, but I agree. I think we should look at this proposed amendment and move this bill forward to the floor. I think that this council could give us some good information in the future, and I think this is a first good step in maybe providing some things that the state might need in the future.
Okay, thank you. So,
Mr. Chairman?
yes, Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that proposed amendment.
Okay, so you all have a proposed amendment that was passed out, changing line 3, page 3, line 3, and inserting consisting of 5 persons who are residents of the state. 4 of the members shall be appointed from each of the 4 water division districts defined in Wyoming Statute 41-3-501A, and 1 member appointed at large. Do I have a second on that motion?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the amendment?
Mr. Chairman, isn't it funny that, that we would use the 4 water divisions?
I think the intent,
Senator Larson?
I think the intent of the bringer is to distribute it around the state, so.
Yeah.
Okay, no questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The amendment has been adopted. Further changes? I would like to propose an amendment on page 3, line 22 and 23. I would like to strike all the words from but all the way to of on line 23. So strike but not more than 75% of. And then I would like to insert the word at. I think that will do it. So it stated the Wyoming State Council of Defense at the same pay and allowance.
I'll second that.
Second.
Oh, you can second that.
Okay, any discussion on that amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Okay, any other amendments to this bill? Senator Kolb.
Page 2, line 5, after governor, strike may and insert shall. And I will add for discussion, Mr. Chairman, that this is creating a paper tiger. Without making such a thing, it's just a piece of paper. And frankly, I don't know where it can go. So I think if we're going to move forward, I think shall's mandatory for this to be, to mean something.
Okay, so it was moved by Senator Kolb and seconded by Senator Brennan to strike the word may on line 5, page 2, and include the word shall. Any, Senator Cooper?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would that change the whole direction of this from simply creating a council to to moving forward with creating the actual military force. The state police, if you will.
In my opinion, it's requiring the governor to do it. There's no appropriation. I'm assuming that if he doesn't have the money, he won't be able to do it. He probably with the word shall would require him to put all the policies and everything in place. Certainly if the legislature did not appropriate money to train it, he couldn't do it. So I don't know. I don't know that I have an answer for you.
Mr. Chairman?
Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, I agree that it changes the whole tune of this thing to, he is definitely gonna organize and maintain within this state. I think it should be a may and leave it to the governor and the legislature to fund it, not demand that it be done.
Okay. Further discussion? All those in favor then of the amendment to change the word to shall, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
No. Okay, that's 3-2, the amendment fails. Any further amendments? Okay, seeing none, could we have a roll call?
Senator Anderson,
No.
Senator Brennan,
Aye.
Senator Cooper,
No.
Senator Kolb,
No.
Chairman Pappas.
Aye.
2 ayes, 3 noes.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
I would like to see this at least proposed for a interim topic. I don't know if we can, we'll have the room for that, but I think this whole idea merits a lot more discussion.
Senator Cole?
Yeah, on that note, I do agree. I think in other committees, we're keeping a track of just what we're talking about for interim topics, so it could be brought up later when we do talk about interim topics. But I agree, this is important. I mean, we have an issue here that needs to be addressed, and I'd like to certainly fully vet it. Thank you.
Okay, well, Senator Larson, thank you for presenting your bill. Sorry I didn't make it, but I suggest you probably put it in for interim topic. Thank you. Okay, we're off to the next bill. Senate File 119, expedited professional licensure for military members. And Senator Boner is not here to present his bill, so I think I am going to lay this back to the end of the pile since he's not here.
Was Barlow gonna do it?
It's Senator Boner's bill. Well,
Barlow's on the left.
yeah. So we're just gonna lay it back to the end of and perhaps he'll come in. So let's move to Senate File 005, School District Vehicles Flashing Lights. This is Senator Cooper's bill. So Senator Cooper,
Would you like me out there?
I think I'd prefer doing that. I think it would, to initially present it, but then when we initially present it, I think you can come back here.
Okay, that's great.
Thank you. Senator Cooper, you have
Thank you,
the,
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This is a great big bill that was brought to us by, to myself and my representative by one of the school districts up in the northwest corner of the state, small school district. It came to our attention that a lot of the small districts have gone back to using suburban type vehicles for school buses. And those buses, those Suburbans are out on the public highways. And they're not authorized at this time to have the school bus lights or even a flashing yellow light on them by statute. So what this does is simply give them the authority to put a flashing yellow light on top of their bus and at least draw attention to the bus when they get out on the Suburban, when they get out on the highway. We've had several incidents up along Highway 120. It's a busy highway, and the Suburban has to make a left-hand turn off of that road to get onto the county roads or the private lanes, and they've had some really close calls. People just not slowing down for them or realizing that it is a school bus, because it's, even though it's marked on the back, it's not lighted and it's not really that clear. So simply asking to change the statute to include these district-owned vehicles to be able to put a yellow light on top, similar to a service vehicle, or, you know, the utility vehicles, something like that, is all we're asking to do. So that's the whole bill.
Yeah. Committee, any questions of the bringer? Senator Kolb?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Cooper, so they have the same lighting standards as we currently use with school buses is the first question. And then the other question was, if you pass said vehicle, is it going to have the same protections as a school bus would have for violating the law of passing a vehicle with flashing lights? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Kolb, Mr. Chairman, Senator Kolb, no, these vehicles are not lighted like a school bus. They're simply a Suburban carrying students, and they're not stopping on the highway to load and unload kids. They're just using the highway to get down the road. But when they go to turn off the road is where we run into problems. So these buses are not on a state highway route. They're all rural buses, very rural, and it's a situation where they got one or two kids going 20 or 30 miles up the creek. Rather than take a big bus, they take a Suburban.
Follow up.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Cooper, so they wouldn't be subject to a ticketing for passing said vehicle with flashing lights?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kolb, that's correct. They would not be subject to ticketing.
Yeah, my understanding it's just for safety warning. Senator Anderson?
Mr. Chairman, I lived in a county that was using those four-door vehicles for school buses, and the state came down and told them they couldn't do that it had to be an official school bus, even though they were using it, like you say, on rural roads. So they had to buy some more school buses. Of course, they don't buy school buses, but they had to acquire more school buses and eliminate the vehicles that you're talking about using. So I didn't even know that anybody used those vehicles anymore. Thank you.
Senator Cooper?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Anderson, you're correct that it was, for quite a while, they were not allowed to, but most of these small districts are using them again.
Okay, further questions? Thank you, Senator Cooper. This is open for public comment. Any, we do. Mr. Boyd, Mr. Bellick, welcome.
Good afternoon. Boyd Brown, I'm the Executive Director of the Wyoming Association of School Administrators, so that's the superintendent organization. A little bit of my background, I've been a superintendent in 3 different districts in Wyoming. I've been the superintendent of the largest and the smallest districts in the state too, so just so you know where I'm at. Again, just like Senator Cooper said, this is a safety issue. They don't have stop signs or stop lights on the MVPs, they call them. But it does give us the opportunity, especially in our weather, when we get ground blizzards and different things like that, those flashing white or amber lights on top do make a big difference for people noticing that they're there, so that it's a lot safer for our students. And our small districts do use these a lot. Sometimes they even use them for some of their activity travel, which is much more cost effective than using a big bus. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nick.
Mr. Bellick?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Nick Bellack. I'm with the Wyoming School Boards Association. I'll echo what Dr. Brown had said about this. This is a safety issue. I will say that our members and our advocacy agenda for 2025, item 5 is specifically around school safety. We support the efforts to provide all students with safe and supported learning environments while providing flexibility for local districts and meeting student and staff safety needs. And I believe the way the bill is written in the language, this hits all things on all levels with that. So we are absolutely in support of that. In addition, we'll talk about supporting collaboration of sharing best practices that if this does go into law, we will definitely do what we can to take what school districts are doing and raise it up for the entire state.
Thank you. Mr. Brown, I apologize for calling you by your first name. Too used to.
Chairman Pappas, there's no problem with that. I've got 2 last names. My first name and my last name sound like a last name, so.
Thank you.
I've been
you.
called Dr. Boyd, Dr. Brown, Mr. Boyd, so it's not a problem.
I apologize.
Mr. Chairman, one more thing that I would like to say about it is this bill is permissive. It's not a shall. And I think that that's important for you to know too, because we do use some of those MVPs for staff travel and different things like that. So it is permissive.
Thank you. Questions, committee? Thank you for your testimony. Any further testimony? Don't believe, we do have one person online, Shane Ogden. Can we bring Shane in? Mr. Ogden, welcome.
Mr. Chairman, thank you so very much. Shane Ogden, Superintendent at Park County School District 16 in Meeteetse. We are located on Highway 120, and as the federal regulations on bus drivers and bus driver permits expanded and became a little bit more complicated, we're finding it more and more difficult to find bus drivers. We would love to put every kid in a bus because we think they are the most safe vehicles that we can put them in. However, that's not efficient or feasible with many of our districts as we struggle to have bus drivers join us after the retiring of many of our veteran drivers. Here on 120, we do have to pull off of that road. And for the most part, it really is not an issue. However, when we have inclement weather, people going a little bit faster than they should be, what we find is that if it is a vehicle that is following our Suburbans, they generally see the brake lights and it's not an issue, but somebody behind them thinks, oh, it's a passing lane and we're going to speed up and get around them. And so it was brought to our attention, and I appreciate Senator Cooper bringing this forward, that if we were able to have either that white or amber light on top of the vehicle, it certainly would provide notice to everybody around just to be a little bit more cautious. And we do feel that this is something that if we were able to do, that would protect our students a little bit more than what we're able to do right now. Thank you so very much, and I would stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ogden. Questions, committee? We appreciate your testimony. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So I think that will close, I'll close public testimony. Committee, what's your pleasure? Everybody moved it. Senator Cole, I'll give you the nod on that one. Anybody want to second it? Senator Brennan will second the motion. Any discussion, committee? Okay, hearing none, could we have a roll call?
Senator Anderson,
Aye.
Senator Brennan,
Aye.
Senator Cooper,
Aye.
Senator Kolb,
Aye.
Chairman Pappas,
Aye.
5 ayes.
Okay, thank you. Senator Cooper, you have it on the floor. Okay, the next bill for our consideration is Senate File 106. Could we have, Pierre, would you go next door and grab Senator Barlow? Wait just a couple of seconds while he comes over. Senator Barlow, welcome. Please tell us about Senate File 106.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. It's a pleasure to be before you this morning. Senate File 106, like many of you, you bring bills that constituents reach out to you about. This came from a friend and constituent in my community that's works in the works in the automotive industry at a dealership, managing that in that management role. And they said, Eric, we've got some challenges. We've been working on it a long time and negotiating with the manufacturers about how we can kind of reset things for Wyoming dealers. So what this bill does, Mr. Chairman, and I'll just go right to the bill title, is it provides a mechanism to establish both the hourly labor rates and retail parts markup rates. Currently in statute, we'll see this as we go in, there is a notation that you can establish labor rates, but there's no process to do that. There's nothing lined out in statute to do that. And then when it comes to the retail parts markup, we actually in statute say 30%, which doesn't seem to make much sense in the capitalistic place that we aspire to be. So what this bill does is just lay out the process by which a dealership can negotiate, if they choose to, or go through this process to establish those labor and parts markup rates. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll just take you directly into the bill. This is current statute. Probably a little background. As you know, these are under what we call franchise laws, and these dealerships, which are, homegrown businesses, these are oftentimes family businesses in our communities. But these franchises and what the state statute does is provide a playing field that these businesses, these local businesses, can deal with these international corporations that have tremendous different power, leverage, bargaining power, negotiating power, or we just don't want to negotiate with you. We're not going to do this business with you, et cetera. So what this does is kind of help level the playing field. This bill goes into a specific thing, and that's the warranty rates, the rates that are going to be paid both on parts and labor from the manufacturer to the dealer, and it addresses that. So, Mr. Chairman, if you would, I'll just walk you quickly through the bill. And I apologize, Mr. Chairman. I shouldn't be out of breath, but I had two bills up and we're just getting through them. So, current statute, and this is I'll go to line 10 of page 2, and 9 and 10. It talks about how you actually figure out what the rates are for warranty service, 7 through 10. Warranty service labor rates, how you do this, but then it's not laid out in statute. So we add some new language to say, we're going to lay that out here. Then you go down to line 14. Here's the parts markup. In statute, we're saying 30% shall be cost plus 30%. So what if it was 22%? Maybe it would be higher, but we're in statute saying this is the markup, period. So both of those things, one, the opportunity to have a process laid out, and two, also a process for this quote unquote striking 30% and having a process. So then we go over to page 3, Mr. Chairman. This is just a little bit of cleanup language on lines 12 through 17. Basically saying this is about claims, putting in claims from the dealership to the manufacturer. Look, if it's a clerical issue or an administrative issue, they don't get to claim that it's a fraudulent in some way. So this is just a clarification that, hey, things go wrong in the system, in the coding and whatever, but that doesn't mean that there was any intentional fraud. So you just start back this process over. But then when we get, so that's just a small piece, but then the critical part of the bill starts at the bottom of page 3 and goes through the remainder of the bill, Mr. Chairman. And what this part does is lay out the process by which these rates for the labor and for parts markup are established. And the basis for this is Dealerships obviously do a lot of work, non-warranty work, and that is the basis by which warranty work can then they can set their warranty work. And if they can make the case to the manufacturer, look, this is how we treat our non-warranty folks, and it's reasonable, the language talks about reasonable, then that is how we establish the warranty rates, the reimbursement that the manufacturer will provide to the dealer for warranty work, both the parts side and the labor side. So the rest of this process, and Mr. Chairman, it is detailed, and I spent a lot of time with the association, working through, making sure it flowed correctly, it made sense. There were do not pass go, do not collect $200, all of those type things. I believe it is been proofed enough times that I think the process works. If anybody has any questions about any specifics in the process, I'll be glad to go through that. And to be clear, you don't have to go through this process. If you negotiate a rate on day one, you don't have to go through this. This is when there's a disagreement about what that markup should be or what those hourly rates should be. Then the statute lays out this process. And certainly the association, Wyoming Association of Automotive Dealers Association, excuse me, they'll testify to this. I think we are the only state that doesn't have a process laid out in statute. So what that does is put our dealers, our local businesses, at a disadvantage to dealers in surrounding states and in the country about how they can negotiate with on these two issues. And in fact, we don't even allow them to negotiate on the parts, right? We just set the rate. We literally set the rate in statute, which I don't know of any other business where state has done that. So anyway, so Mr. Chairman, if you will, I'll be glad, like I said, I'll be glad to go through this. The process, there's timelines in this, there's appeals, and then ultimately, if there is not an agreement, they can go to district court, sort it out in district court. But Mr. Chairman, there's a lot of detail on that, and certainly be glad to stand for questions, any of that detail. Take questions. I will be clear that some things are not part of this process. So if you go to page 6, there are some things that are not part of establishing these rates, the hourly rate or the parts rate. And you can read through them. So there are things that are not part of the calculation, not part of the understanding. And some things, I'll point out another one where we actually say, oh, but for this particular item, it's only a 40% markup. That's on page 10, and that's a complete engine and transmission assemblies. So in statute, we're still going to use, at least in one instance, 40%. That's something they negotiated with the manufacturers. I'm trying to reflect the work that they did to come to this understanding. I'm not making any policy, I did not try to make any policy decisions to that, but I point that out as an example where we got rid of 30 for a lot of things, but there was an understanding, at least between the dealers and the manufacturers, that some things will leave the same. So, or we'll deal with them that way. Finally, Mr. Chairman, the definitions, and the definitions are actually in this section, not in the broader title, if you will, of the franchise agreements, because we didn't want them to apply in other ways. So they're just, the definitions are specifically to this process of negotiating both the hourly rates and the parts retail markup rate. So, Mr. Chairman, I'd be glad to stand for any questions. There are experts in the room, both with the association and maybe the manufacturers are here. I don't know. There's manufacturers here or representatives, and certainly some dealerships that here can speak to specific questions that they deal with on a day-to-day basis, Mr. Chairman. But that's the bill before you. Be glad to stand for questions or elaborate on anything that the committee may have interest in. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Senator. Senator Anderson, you have questions for Senator Barlow?
Mr. Chairman, yes, I do. On page 2, line 14, we eliminated the 30% and just puts a reasonable rate in there. So we eliminated 30% there. And then on page 5, line 15, there's some calculation there that you get you do a little math there and get the difference and multiply it by 100. I don't understand that kind of calculating. Can you tell me what's going on there?
Mr. Chairman, if I could.
Senator
So,
Barlow.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. So and I agree, it's can be a little challenging, but the math works. I did it several times. The math worked. All we're trying to get to is the percentage markup. So we take the non-warranty work, or parts, this happens to be parts markup for the non-warranty. And obviously, there's exclusions. I showed you the part of the bill where there's exclusions for accessories, for different things. We exclude those, and then we calculate, and so we're a 90-day period, or so many invoices, et cetera. That's all defined in the statute. And you take that percentage, or that markup, do the math with it, the division, and then the multiplication, et cetera, and that gives you the 30%, or 22%, or 17%, or 42%, and that's the basis for which a dealer, if they're going through this process, is going to make the request to the manufacturer. This is what we believe our markup is, and here's how it is justified based on our non-warranty invoices. So, Mr. Chairman, it does work out to a percentage, 30%, 32, 28, 27, whatever that is based on the numbers that are used. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So committee, this whole calculation and everything in here is very detailed. I don't think it behooves us to get into the nuts and bolts. If we do want that, I think we can get with the bringer of the committee offline, because we'll be here all day if we discuss how this process happens. I think it would be up to us to listen to the manufacturers, the dealers, because they went through all of this. If they're all in agreement, I think that our knowledge of the process, probably not that important, but if it is important to you, I think you can deal with that offline, but I just don't want to spend the whole day talking about the intricacies of how these are calculated. Senator Kolb.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Barlow, I think there's a broader question here about what this thing intends to do. I mean, on one hand, I'd like the free market to decide what they'd like to do when it comes to the dealerships and the manufacturers. Yet, in some cases, we want to do that. In other cases, we don't want to do that. Now, we got on page 10, line 18, we got 40%, and I guess the question is are we, frankly, for lack of a better word, price fixing on guaranteed profits in some cases, in other cases not? I'd like to know the philosophy on why it kind of is varied across the bill, because I think that we should allow the free market to decide with the negotiations on what they're going to get for reimbursements. And I don't know what the broader question is: what dog do we have in the fight as state legislators to commit to these kind of percentages? I'd like to know the background, if I did a halfway decent job of asking that question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first of all, we're already in the fight, because we set 30% on parts straight across the board. It's current statute. So what this does is removes it from all parts except for this one particular one, which I can't speak to the understanding they have. I just tried to represent the best I could their negotiated position. And I'll let the professionals, the people in the business from your community and other communities, talk about why this might be unique for this particular component, Mr. Chairman. You know, as far as the broader thing, why are we in it at all? I think that's a fair question, but in my view, this is where we are. The request comes, are we willing to take it on, or do we have reservations about it? And those are fair policy questions. I absolutely understand that. Fair policy questions. I don't know that I can reflect the negotiations and the discussions that they've had. I can just reflect, this was the understanding that was brought to me. We worked together to put it in the best form we can so that it was reflective of the understandings they had, and bring it to you. There are other things in here I question them about as well. Said, you really want to? Yeah, well, that's our understanding with our partners, i.e. the manufacturers. That's the understanding we want to proceed with. Now, certainly, as you know, the legislative process can now take it. It belongs to you, belongs to the legislature. We can make those adjustments if we so choose. If this particular 40% is not reflective of the something we want to advance, or an individual, it's maybe you consider repealing that 40%, or some other form. But all I can say is that I did my best, we did our best to reflect the understanding they had come to with their partners in the manufacturing world and provide a process that takes the state out of the 30%. I mean, I don't even understand, 30, I agree with you. I don't know where 30%, maybe there's some of the historical knowledge that can come up why we have 30%. But this process has been eliminated in every state in the union. The 30%, the strict markups. Now we have a process that all the other states have adopted that provides some type of process to get to there. So I apologize, Senator Cole, Mr. Chairman, I cannot get to those answers, but I hopefully the folks behind me who negotiated this as far as with their partners will be able to. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Okay, committee, any further questions? Thank you, Senator
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Barlow. Could we open it up for public comment? Please, everybody who wants to, please fill the chairs. Morning, Ms. Allen.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Marcia Allen with Wyoming Auto Dealers Association. And as Senator Barlow explained, the bill, I'm not going to go into that, but there are certain questions on how we negotiated. So the dealers asked for this bill. I researched extensively other surrounding states, especially on what their process is and how this is handled in their state. So it only affects the manufacturers and the dealers because it is the warranty reimbursement that the manufacturers pay the dealers on warranty repairs. So that's why we negotiated with the alliance that represents the manufacturers. And it was over a year that we had those talks and researched and looked at other states, did comparisons. Most of the other states, I will say, are far more complex than what we are asking for. There are much more restrictions, especially on the manufacturer side. We just wanted the basic process outline of how to go about asking for an increase on their warranty reimbursement, particularly in parts. So the 40% question on the engines and transmissions, that was actually one of the last pieces of our negotiation with the manufacturer, because across the country, it's a mixed bag on how that's handled. Some pay full retail, are allowed full retail reimbursement requests. Others, it's a handling fee. So we, with the manufacturers and discussions with them, came to the 40% because that is where some of our dealers are already being reimbursed, and we didn't want to harm them and go back to the 30%. So that's how that 40% got there. As far as how the original 30% got there, I don't have an answer to that. That's been in statute for as long as I've been with the association, and I've been with the association for 36 years in March. So it goes beyond that. I don't know how it got there. As far as the free market, yes, the rates are based on free market because the non-warranty retail rates, that's how they're established, is the market establishes those. So the reimbursement from the manufacturer would be based on what they are charging the non-warranty customer already. And that the market does allow for that already. That's how they're determined. And the dealers that are here will be able to answer that more detail for you. But the customer isn't affected in this negotiation. It's solely between the manufacturer and the dealer on what this bill does. And I will turn it over to the dealers
First of all,
here.
any questions for Ms. Allen? Okay.
Good morning. My name is Chuck Reward. I'm the dealer for the Ford dealership in Wheatland, Wyoming, Laramie Peak Motors. I've been there 31 years. Traditionally, the manufacturers have discounted their payments back to the dealers on warranty labor and warranty parts. The trend started over 20 years ago where states began to request that that be looked at and paid back at the warranty labor rates or at the retail labor rates that they're able to charge in their markets, set by the market, set by competition, open market competition. Every state in the country except for Wyoming has passed some form of this reform where the manufacturers are paying full retail for parts and labor. And it depends on the different parts, the different repairs, and that's why the processes and policies have to be in place to negotiate that between the dealers and the manufacturers. We went with a less aggressive process here so that we could get it passed. And we coordinated with the manufacturers and worked with them for a year to make something that's palatable for them and palatable for us. And that's what we have brought here. There should be no heartburn or stress between the two entities because we've already gone through that process. And we're just asking to be on a level playing field with all the other states in the country, and especially Colorado, Nebraska, Montana, Idaho. We have to compete in the marketplace for our technicians. And I don't know if you know this or not, but there's a tremendous shortage of technicians across the country. And when we are being forced to accept less from the manufacturer, that leaves us with less flexibility as far as how we can hire, recruit, and retain technicians. And this puts us on a level playing field with our surrounding states especially. And I appreciate your looking at this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Ruert? Thank you. Sir.
Hi, good morning. I am Dallas Terrell, and I'm proudly representing Terrell Auto Centers. We are celebrating 87 years in business here in Wyoming, so I am very proud of that. I'm just gonna kind of channel what these guys have said prior. It basically is just leveling the playing field for us here in Wyoming. Mr. Ruert said it's hard to find technicians and be competitive in that field, and this would dramatically help us in that field. So thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Terrell? Senator Kolb.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's probably goes for everybody, but just in general, I'm just confused on how we have a protectionist attitude towards the automobile market or the warranty in this case, and no other segment of the state of Wyoming. I can assure you there's other people that do business that don't have any of these protections with any guaranteed markup of any sorts. And I just don't know why all of a sudden, maybe it's because you guys have lobbyists, I don't know. But now I'm hearing that we need protections and certain price guarantees that defy the free market. And I don't know, maybe the automobile industry is so unique it needs this kind of protection. It's the first I've come to realize that we actually have guaranteed profits for you folks on some level. And no other industry that I know of is afforded this ability. So I just want to know why it's appropriate, or, maybe there's some uniqueness, and maybe you could help me out with that, with the manufacturers in dealing with them, which puts you in a terrible position. And I don't want to see you folks go out of business, but I don't understand why we have to have protectionist percentages that guarantees a certain amount of markup. Could you help me out with that? Thank you.
Senator Kolb, Chairman.
Mr. Ruert.
What we're trying to do, the free market sets the retail labor and parts rates. We have to compete every day against other Ford dealerships. I'm a Ford dealer. We have to compete with other manufacturers. We also, as small businesses across the country, not just Wyoming, but the National Auto Dealers Association protects the interests of the dealers against the multinational corporations that run the auto industry. And we have had to have these protections for over 100 years because we would be at a very disadvantaged position against the manufacturers. So we are asking to be paid the same rate on our repairs when the factory pays it versus what a customer, a retail customer or a fleet customer would pay for the repairs. That's all we're asking for here, is to have the same payment from both. Because the manufacturers have traditionally discounted the labor and the parts markup to the dealers. And that's what we're asking for. That's why we have protections for the dealers, because we are in an unlevel playing field against the manufacturers in most instances.
Senator Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sir, without this bill, how are you currently calculating your labor rates for warranty work? I understand where you're at on the non-warranty work, but how are you currently, and where you're at on parts, actually, but the the warranty labor, how are you calculating that number now?
There's two ways. You can show the manufacturer an example of repair orders that you've worked on in the last 30 days, 90 days, and request and negotiate what you've earned from those there. We are limited in parts markup. Our parts markup is on average 15% less for warranty repair reimbursement than what the retail customer pays, okay? All the manufacturers download our data virtually every night. They know exactly what an RO is, how much we charge for that repair. They give us labor ops that say that this rear axle repair pays this amount of hours, okay? And it's like book time. You know the books that we use to calculate how long it takes. Most of their book time is negotiated and sometimes at a tremendous discount versus how many hours we get from a regular retail customer based on the open market books. So all we're trying to do is be paid the same by everybody across the board. And the manufacturers have had a discount to us for years. And we're the last state in the country that has asked for that policy to change.
Further questions? Thank you. Appreciate your testimony.
Okay.
Any further testimony in the room? And please come down.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Dave Pickard. I represent the Alliance for Automotive Innovation, also referred to as Auto Innovators. We changed the name of the association about 5 years ago. Essentially, 99% of the vehicles sold in the United States are part of the Manufacturers Association. We were brought into this, as you heard testimony from the dealers. We were brought into this. This is their act that they wanted to make some changes to. We did go through a very collaborative process. We appreciate them coming to us in the beginning to make sure that this comes out as a clean, negotiated process bill. We've worked through it. We're satisfied with where it's at. Primarily, they wanted updates to the changes in the warranty statutes, and that's what this bill reflects. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Appreciate it, Mr. Pickard.
Mr. Chairman, Jason Baker, I'm here on behalf of General Motors. We're a member of the Alliance and are very comfortable with the language in the bill.
Questions for Mr. Baker? Thank you, gentlemen. Any further testimony out there? Okay, we do have one member online, Mr. Brad Follinsby. You could bring Mr. Follinsby in, please.
Hello, thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee.
Thank you, Mr. Follinsby. We hear you, but we do not see you.
Oh, I need to. There we go. So, my name is Brad Follinsby. I am the operating manager of White's Mountain Motors here in Casper, Wyoming. I have been so for the last 15 years and have been in the automotive dealership since 1993 here in Wyoming. My testimony would basically echo the others of the dealerships here today. But I also just wanted to reiterate that this really does put Wyoming on a more level, even playing field with other surrounding states and other dealers. These rates that we're asking, the work that we perform at our stores are being reimbursed at much higher rates at surrounding states, which puts Wyoming dealers under the current statutes at a disadvantage for hiring and retaining technicians in a job pool that is very slim as it is, and the challenges that we have in Wyoming for recruiting and retaining employees. Other than that, I appreciate your consideration and support of this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Follinsby. Any questions from the committee? We appreciate your testimony. So not seeing any other testimony, we will close public comment. Committee, what's your pleasure? Moved by Senator Cooper. Second. And seconded by Senator Brennan. Discussion committee? Any, Senator Kolb?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a no vote on this, and I'm a no vote because it's a price protection situation. Testimony already implied that they had negotiated up to 40% in some cases without this bill being needed. I just don't think we should pick winners and losers, and even though I understand the issues that were spoken of, I think it's just not in my best interest to support this particular industry and only this industry. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Committee, are there any amendments that you'd want to see on the bill? Okay, hearing none, let's take a roll call.
Senator Anderson?
Aye.
Senator Brennan?
Aye.
Senator Cooper?
Aye.
Senator Kolb?
No.
Chairman Pappas?
Aye.
4 ayes, 1 no.
Thank you. Senator Barlower, thank you. We'll see you on the floor. Okay, that brings us to Senate File Number 110, inclusion of crossing guards for governmental claims. Senator Brennan, would you please present us this bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and fellow members of the committee. What we have before us now is Senate File 110, Inclusion of Crossing Guards for Governmental Claims Act. In our school district, there have been students who have been, several years ago, there was a student who was hit in a crossing walk and he lost his life. And even just a few months ago, there was a student walking home, an elementary school student walking home from school, and he was also hit crossing the street. And so there has been parents who have really tried to work with the district in getting better policy for crossing the streets and keeping our students safe getting to and from school in the crosswalks and stuff. And they were denied. The school district said, no, we can't have a policy. So some of us inquired into what the things are, why we can't have a policy. And we were met with, well, we can't have a policy because we don't have protection for the volunteers and the school people. We might get sued if we help students across the street. So in response to that, we have this inclusion of crossing guards for Governmental Claims Act. Really, the heart of the bill is page 2, lines 1, and we include volunteers and school district employees acting as a roadway crossing guard on behalf of or in service of a public school district legally organized as a body corporate pursuant to Wyoming Statute 21-3-101. So this just gives volunteers and school employees governmental immunity when they help kids cross the street. And I'll take any questions.
Questions? Senator Kolb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Brennan, do the volunteers go through any safety training before they act as crossing guards?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Gold, I would imagine that this is up to each school district, how they would do this. Like we found out in some school districts, there just isn't even, they're not willing to put in a process to help our kids across the street, citing this as the reason why they can't have a crossing walk program for our kids.
Further questions, committee? Thank you, Senator Brennan. Okay, I'll open this up for public comment. Please come up. Mr. Brown, Mr. Bellick, welcome back.
Mr. Chairman, I tend to like the bills in your committee better than the bills in the Education Committee, so thank you for that. They're a lot more precise, I think. Again, Boyd Brown, I'm the Executive Director for the Wyoming Association of School Administrators. Think that this is a great bill. Gives us the opportunity to protect those people. To Senator Kolb's question about training, districts have even volunteers go through some sort of background check and training for all the different things that they do. So that would be left up to districts, but there would be some training in all of that. So again, supporting the bill and think that it's gives us the opportunity to get some more people out there to help take care of our kids.
Questions for Mr. Brown? Thank you. Mr. Bellick?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Nick Bellack, Wyoming School Boards Association. I'll cite our fifth advocacy item again. Fundamentally, the question we all ask ourselves at the association is this what is best for kids? And just cannot find an answer to say that this is not what is best for kids. So we absolutely support this, and I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. Questions, committee? Thank you, gentlemen. Any further public comment? We have no one online on this bill, correct? Okay, so I'll close public comment. What's your pleasure? Committee?
Move the bill.
It's moved by
Senator Brennan.
moved by Senator Kolb. We'll give Senator Brennan the second.
I'll withdraw my motion to have Senator.
Okay,
Brennan
Senator Brennan will
make the motion.
move the motion and a second by Senator Kolb.
As long as it gets moved.
Thank you. Okay, any discussion on the bill? Any changes to the bill? Seeing none, let's take a roll call.
Senator Anderson,
Aye.
Senator Brennan,
Aye.
Senator Cooper,
Aye.
Senator Kolb,
Aye.
Chairman Pappas.
Aye,
5 ayes.
great. We'll see that bill on the floor as well. So we have now two bills left that are actually both by Senator Boner. And I don't know, is he next door? Could we go see if he's available? I would like to knock out 119 since the military department's here. Let's hope he's available. And if we don't talk too long, maybe we can knock both of them out.
219.
Yeah, but it's simple. He's not there. Certainly, there's 4 members on the Bill 121 that are co-sponsors on this. Myself, Senator Cooper, and Senator Brennan. I guess there's 3 of us. I want Senator Kolb as well. We could probably do this for the good senator and knock it out. So let's yeah, sure. Senator Kolb?
I must willfully not prepare prepared, but I'll do my best.
I think we've seen many license plate bills, so they're similar to most of the rest. So the military department, we won't get to 119. I don't want to do that without Senator Boner here, so I apologize that we didn't get to it, but we'll have it first up next Thursday. Okay, thank you. Senator Kolb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I here present Senate File 121, and it is a rodeo license plate bill. I think the real premise for this was we live in the state of Wyoming. We have steamboat on our license plates. At least they used to be able to be seen until they changed the license plates. So this would be a rodeo license plate, really to celebrate Wyoming and the rodeo history of the state of Wyoming. And that's really simply it. I think we've seen license plate bills before. There is a small appropriation of $2,000 associated with this bill. And I'll stand for any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Kolb. I know the department's here to speak to it, and so I'll ask, unless you have questions of Senator Kolb. Okay, thank you. I appreciate the testimony, but
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
we could probably get a lot of good information from the department. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Lacey Bruckner, Wyoming Department of Transportation. And I appreciate the opportunity for the department to speak on Senate File 121 for a rodeo license plate. In looking through the bill, which just sets up an additional specialty license plate provided to the residents here in the state of Wyoming, it's very similar to all of the other specialty plates that the department already administers. So we don't, from a department standpoint, see any issues with administering this bill the way it's written. Like I said, it's very similar to all the other specialty plate bills. It excludes commercial vehicles because those vehicles have different registration requirements if they operate interstate. It excludes trailers as well, so you were talking any motor vehicle, passenger cars, pickups, motorcycles, multi-purpose vehicles. Those are all included in this, which is very consistent with all of our other specialty plate bills. On page 3, it provides for the department to design the rodeo license plate and requires that it state that the license plate say rodeo, the official sport of Wyoming. And then starting on page 4 and going through page 5, just adds this additional statute for this particular specialty plate to the rest of the plates for loss or destruction of a plate or sticker that goes with this particular plate. It requires the department to design the plate, prescribe any forms necessary, and make the rodeo license plate available beginning January 1 of 2026, and the department has no concerns with that. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would stand for any questions.
And it should be pointed out that if 500 are not issued, then it's eliminated. However, that may or may not be the case, as there is another bill that's going to change, that's coming, that's going to change the way we actually do plates. I think it's a House bill.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Where right now we do plates every 8 years. And then we throw them all away, whether they're bad or they're good. And so many states have gotten away from that, and you'll see a bill come forward, if it comes from the House, where we'll just print on demand. So if my plate is good for 20 years, I don't need to change it. And that'll help, especially for all these specialty plates. Once they get printed, then you can keep it. We don't have to reprint it every year. So I digress. So, but that's coming. So, committee, any questions for Lacey? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any further public comment out there? No one online, I know. So, committee, I'll close public comment. What's your pleasure? Moved by Senator Kolb, seconded by Senator Cooper. Cooper? Yep. Kolb and Cooper. Any discussion? Any changes? Okay, roll call.
Senator Anderson,
Aye.
Senator Brennan,
Aye.
Senator Cooper,
Aye.
Senator Kolb,
Aye.
Chairman Pappas.
Aye.
That's 5 ayes.
Okay. We'll ask Senator Boner to present it on the floor. Thank you, Senator Kolb, for pinch hitting. Appreciate it. Okay, so that concludes our business for today. Let's adjourn. We got a few minutes to get upstairs. Thank you, committee.